Hey everybody, this is Adam. I just wanted to take a second to talk about Huntstock before we dive into this episode. Huntstock's going to be August 12th, 13th, and the 14th in Westminster, Mass. If you haven't got tickets for that, it's going to be the biggest collection of companies, brands, content creators, and everything that celebrates the Northeast hunting culture. There's going to be a lot of great people there for you guys to meet, a lot of events, shows, and stuff like that. So if you haven't got tickets, click the link in our bio to get those, or you can get them at the gate. STAGR Gear is going to have a booth there. You can stop by, check out some of the gear, buy some of the gear, try it on and all that stuff. STAGR Cast is also going to have a booth right there next to it. And kind of what we wanted to tell you guys is we want to do a special little episode at Huntstock where we get to connect with you guys. So if you have a buck story, some tips or some knowledge you want to share with everybody, we'd love to have you sit down with us for 5-10 minutes, tell your story, your information, anything like that. We're going to put together a listener episode. I think it would be a good opportunity to connect with you guys. So if you want to be on STAGRcast, stop by our booth at Huntstock, August 12th, 13th, and the 14th. And we look forward to seeing you guys there. You're listening to STAGRcast, brought to you by STAGR. All right, welcome back to another episode of STAGRcast. This is episode 13. Isaac just looked it up for me. Couldn't remember what it was. And we're sitting down here tonight with Jeff Doyle and Jim Doyle, Jeff's father. And thanks for having us, guys. We appreciate it.
Thanks for coming down, guys.
Been looking forward to it. And, a lot of guys have seen your videos before, so you don't need much of an introduction. But if you can, for those that don't know you, give us a quick introduction, where you're from, the states you hunt, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm originally from central New York. Now I live in Massachusetts, but spent a good portion of time in New Hampshire too, and mostly hunt New York, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. 41, so I've been at it a while. Have the YouTube channel, of course. Tracking 200 series on there, which is going in its fourth year, and just love sharing what I do. Yeah.
What about you, Jim?
Central New York. I've been hunting the Adirondacks. This coming year will be my 55th year hunting the wilderness areas of the Adirondacks.
Yeah.
Killed about 35 bucks, rack bucks over that time, and hunt maybe 70% in the Adirondacks, 30% in other areas. But pretty much hunt just New York.
Yeah. You guys got a pretty good team system, it seems like, when you guys are hunting. In some of the videos, you guys got a little team system going, right?
Yeah, sometimes we just leave each other at the truck and
divide
see each
and
other.
conquer.
Yeah.
We usually drop each other 2 or 3 miles away and then kind of hunt separately.
Yeah. Yep. Wasn't there a video a couple years ago? Was it the Adirondacks? You got a buck, and then just after that he got a buck. What was the story on those? That was pretty cool.
I guess there's a ton of beech nuts. That was the first thing, and it was really crunchy. And we went in together on this trail, and there's beech nuts every place, but the crunch was just super loud. So we're kind of we'll divide and conquer, and he went, one way, and as he's walking away, I can hear him crunching, and all of a sudden I hear him crunching from a different direction. And I saw a deer, although I couldn't tell what it was, pretty quickly. So that gave me, high hopes in the area. But then we kind of, separated, worked my way up over top of this mountain that I had actually shot a buck on a few years before. And as I'm up there, I can hear this kind of weird noise, right? And it was 2 bucks fighting. And I saw 3 bucks tangle one time when I was in a tree stand. And I thought, if I had only got down, I could have climbed down from my tree stand, run over there, and shot one of them.
No kidding.
Yes. Had the opportunity. So I knew at this point, I need to motor over there while they're still getting busy.
They're preoccupied.
Yeah. And then I hear, and I was like, no way. So you got to tell what happened there.
Well, it was super crunch conditions, and most people don't like hunting crunchy conditions, but we utilize the grunt call a lot on crunchy conditions. The deer hear you coming, but if you do the 7-11, 7 to 11 steps, stop, grunt, 7-11 steps, stop, and grunt, and you're a little patient and use that grunt call, you can just work in towards a buck, and at some point they start coming to you, and you can hear them crunching coming to you, and that's what I did with that buck. I crunched them in. So.
Yeah. Hey.
No kidding. Out. And how far away were you guys? A mile or two, or pretty close?
We were about a mile.
About a mile?
Yeah.
So you shot the buck and you had 2 fighting in front of you.
Yeah.
So then continue with what happened.
So I was pretty certain that he had just got one, right?
Yeah.
I was pumped, but I could hear those bucks fighting, and I just started moving fast, like as fast as I could, sneaking. And I guess you might be able to see it in the video, but when I saw them, they were in this little clearing, and they were just spinning. They had their racks together, and they're just spinning and spinning and spinning. And when I got the gun up, I don't know which was which, but it was so cool. I was going to shoot one of them.
Right.
Like I couldn't tell if one was a big and one was a little one. So I just waited till one spun by and I pulled the trigger.
Yep.
And I didn't realize at that point, when a few seconds had passed and a buck came running by me, I couldn't pull the trigger on that buck because I don't know if it's the one I just shot or the other one.
Right.
So I waited, and it was a little touch and go because eventually you came up and we're trying to find blood, and there wasn't any blood to speak of. I went down off the mountain, and like I said, it was crunchy. I'm down there, and all of a sudden I hear crunch, 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 crunch. I didn't have the video rolling, and I could hear deer running right at me. And I thought, oh no, what if a big buck comes running right at me? Like
and you
I
can't
don't
shoot.
even know if I missed this buck, right? And 3 doe came up over this little rise, and I was just like, oh, thank God it's not a buck that I gotta pass up at this point. Yep. So eventually he found blood, and the buck was dead, right? The buck that was the buck that ran by me.
Yep.
That was him, and he was just piled up on this trail just down the side of the mountain.
No kidding.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the buck I shot was I'd been hunting for 10 days in the Adirondacks. I hadn't seen a deer in 10 days. And I told Jeff, if I see a buck today, you're with me, I'm going to shoot a buck. So it was a small 5-pointer. It was no big buck or anything, but it was my trophy for the year, and I was happy as can be.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good day in the Adirondacks. Bucks fighting, you both get
Heck
one.
yeah, and
You're
then the
never gonna
work
forget
began,
that.
huh?
Yeah.
You had to get 2 bucks out.
Yeah.
Oh, and the snow conditions, that super crunchy condition.
Yeah.
The snow was like Velcro. We dragged those bucks maybe a half a mile, and there wasn't any hair left on the side of the bucks.
Yeah.
They were just down to bare skin.
Was he like plowing up the snow kind of?
No, it was rock solid.
Oh,
Velcro,
gotcha.
And there wasn't any hair left on them, so Jeff actually carried both bucks out.
You carry one out and then
last
came
month,
back for the other one?
Came back and he carried both those bucks out.
That's a workout, huh?
That's what sons are for, right? How did you get Jeff into it when he was young? What was the story? I know we get a lot of young fathers that listen in on the podcast and they probably want to know about how you get your kids into it. What did you do to get Jeff into it, or did you just kind of take to it?
Well, probably the first hunting experience Jeff might have had was it was a father and son, 3 fathers and 3 sons, 10-year-olds. Went back. We hunted across the West Canada Creek. It was about 150 feet wide, and you rode across a cable car, and we had a wall tent, 8x10 wall tent back in the woods. I hunted out of it for 20 years. So it was the early muzzleloader season, and the game plan was 10 years old, we were going to let Jeff shoot a doe, because you could shoot a doe with a muzzleloader that time. So we went up on this Beech Nut Ridge, and we're looking around eating lunch, and there's all sorts of bear nests. Every place you looked, there was where the bear pulled branches in, bear nest. And Jeff says, hey, Dad, there's a bear. So you tell the rest of the story.
Yeah, we were eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I didn't know what those marks were on the beech trees. I remember asking, somebody hit it with a hatchet, and you explained, that it was claw marks from the bear climbing, and we looked at we saw the nests, and then, the bear's just walking by us, just broadside. What would you say? I'd say it was like 20, 25 yards away.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty close, right? And you go, you want to take it? And I was like, no. You take it. So he shot it, and it ran up, and when it dropped, I was like, Dad, is it dead? And it pops back up and just starts coming right at us.
Oh my gosh.
Full bore.
That's exciting.
And it hit a little sapling and just fell over.
Maybe 10 feet from us.
Yeah, it was pretty close.
Really close to us.
Were you guys pulled back up, ready to shoot again, or
It was
what?
the muzzleloader.
Oh, yeah.
I remember looking at him, and I mean, you get the excitement anyways, and that powder, the little measure cup is shaking like this, and I'm thinking.
It's a good way.
So it was a great start for a young guy.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
And then at that time in New York, you could only shoot like one buck. Now you can shoot 7 deer in New York legally.
Okay.
But, so I burned some tags, would let Jeff, fill my tag with a small buck, and
Yep.
it was just the price you paid as a parent to
Right.
get him involved. And now I'm 69 and he's 41, and he still comes home to hunt with me. Maybe
Yep.
only 1 or 2 days out of the whole year, but if a guy wants a long-term relationship with his son, and they're into hunting, you got to make them successful. Take them someplace where you don't take them to the hardcore Adirondacks where your success ratios are so low. Take him where he can be successful hunting.
Right.
Get his interest up, and then work on the more difficult hunting areas.
And then from there it evolved into the big woods hunting and stuff together. And
Oh yeah.
yeah,
You guys have had some wicked adventures, I bet.
Yeah. I mean, we had the option to always go what they call the southern tier in New York, and that was shotgun drives, right? Small property. Dad had access on a farm. That was like pretty primo hunting, but eventually got to the point where I wanted to go up to the Adirondacks and have that adventure versus be around people that are hunting and on small parcels. So we started to do a lot more up north.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of guys say that live down in that area that's like, right in between the like southern part and the Adirondacks. It seems like all the guys end up wanting to hunt the Adirondacks. There's something about that big woods thrill. There's not as many deer. The racks might not get as big, but it's something about it. And, I relate to it because I definitely would rather hunt the big woods than farm country any day.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's the big woods you can get in the Northeast too.
The
Adirondack
Adirondacks
Park is
are endless.
Oh, the
They're
wilderness
endless.
areas in the Adirondacks are just majestic.
Yeah.
I mean, the 200-year-old trees, enormous white pine, great gray birch. You wouldn't even recognize it as a gray birch. They're just 5 feet in diameter, and they don't even look like a birch. And,
Yep.
and it's big woods, but it's wilderness that hasn't been cut in a couple hundred years.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful area. It's not the best hunting areas,
Right.
but it's one of the most beautiful areas.
So now is the forever wild parts of the Adirondacks with the entire thing pretty much, right? Was that
Well,
cut?
there's 6 million acres in the
Yeah.
Adirondack Park.
Yep.
3 million of it is privately owned, and 3 million acres is state-owned.
Gotcha.
And the state-owned land is forever wild. And then within that state-owned land, there's different land use classifications or designations.
Right.
And one of them is wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
And there's about 1 million acres of wilderness areas in the Adirondacks. So it's the biggest park in the continental United States, excluding Alaska. So,
No kidding.
yeah.
In that wilderness area, was that logged off like way back in the day, or was that never logged off? Like
Both.
Both?
Some of the
Some?
areas were logged off, but they haven't been logged in 200 years.
wow.
Other areas where the loggers really couldn't get to some of those areas,
real
or
old
they were in
growth.
private holdings,
Yep.
and they weren't logged. So if you go on the internet, there's actually, and look up old growth forests in the Adirondacks,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see a list of about 20 parcels with the acreage, some up to 40,000.
Wow.
Matter of fact, that Five Ponds Wilderness area
Yep.
is one. I think that's the largest wilderness area, old growth forest in the Adirondacks.
No
Yep.
kidding. It's kind of cool to think about that. That's like what the woods would have looked like when Christopher Columbus got here. It's
Yeah.
never been cut
Yeah.
still to this day, which is kind of cool to me because
It is.
everything around, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, it's all been cut.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much. I would say 90% of it at least.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's kind of a cool
There's probably a
thing.
good percentage of bucks that never see human out there and just die of natural causes. Would you say that don't get
There's-
shot at? Or
There's
no?
in the Adirondacks, the deer migrate, but
Mhm.
some of them migrate to feeding areas where there's humans. But there's a lot of bucks and does that migrate to natural wintering areas that are devoid of humans. So
Right.
they never really have that contact. The particular area that we hunt is one of those areas where they're going just to natural yards.
No kidding.
And the yards have been preserved. I mean, they haven't been cut.
That's cool.
Yep.
So there's some probably real giants out there lurking.
Well, I'll say you know, there's times when you're back in the woods and you think, wow, I wonder how long it's been since somebody's set foot on this, you know.
Yeah.
And that happened to me last year. I got into this little pocket between these two kind of swampy areas, and it was not easily accessible. There's this beautiful scrape lawn, and that night I was telling him about it, and he was there like 2 hours before me.
So 2 hours. Your answer is 2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dad beating
Yeah.
me punches there.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, we pull up on X and we're like, where? Yeah, right there.
Oh, that's funny. Like father, like son, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We came in from different directions, and yeah, it's funny.
We usually start with a shameless stat segment. We kind of get off topic there, but want to hit us with some numbers here? Give us your best scoring buck, heaviest weight buck you guys both have. Let's hear them.
He beats me in both.
Well, my highest scoring buck is 181.6. It's non-typical 17-pointer. I got it outside the Adirondack Park. It's a New York buck. It was a great hunt, and I worked that buck a lot. No 200-pound bucks in New York, but Western Ontario, I got 4.
Yep.
The heaviest was 228.
Wow.
That's
It's a big, heavy one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about you, Jeff?
I've got 2 bucks from Western Ontario over 200. Hence the Track and 200 series, you know,
Yep.
continues.
Yep.
I haven't notched the belt here in the Northeast, but maybe this year will be the year. And then folks, maybe if they've seen some of my videos, the next ridge buck was my highest scoring buck. That was 146 and 4/8.
Giant buck.
Giant.
That was, yeah. If you haven't seen that video, you got to go see it on Jeff's YouTube
That's a
channel.
wicked video.
Yeah. Was
Last day of the year, and I think he weighed 168.
Yeah, it's a good
Yeah,
buck.
December 31st. So I had tracked that buck earlier in the week, and I had marked a spot where I saw a big track, but I wasn't sure it was him. But early in the week, I'd seen where that buck was feeding in acorns, and there's just these giant time marks, you know, big, wide. That's what I'm saying. They're wide time marks, and yeah, that was really neat to be able to catch up with that buck.
Yeah.
That'll get your heart pounding, won't it?
Oh,
When you're on
yeah.
a track and you see those big old antler marks.
Yeah.
Look
Time
like
marks
somebody's
get you
sticking a
going in the
rake in the
worst
ground
way.
there.
Yeah.
Love the time marks.
I love the wide ones. Wait,
Yeah.
What gets you guys excited?
Wide.
Wide?
Wide. Yeah.
Definitely
Wide
wide.
mass. Yeah.
Just
Mass,
when you see them, they don't even look like real to me anyways. When you see that big wide thing going through the woods, it's like out of my dreams, you know? Like,
Yeah.
But-
I'd shoot a wide 2-point.
yeah, oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I want to loop back because in a lot of your videos, you do a lot of calling, vocalization, rattling and stuff. It seems like you've got a pretty keen sense on when to stop, you know, when to grunt and when to rattle. And so what do you look for when you're tracking a buck or when you're bear ground hunting? What are some specifics that you see that hey, I need to stop here? What do you look for in a vocalization situation?
So what I'm trying to do there is have an advantage, and when I'm, you know, just you could do it when you're tracking, right? If you're looking, say you're on a track and you're gonna come up over a little lip, rather than walk over and completely expose yourself. If the buck is up there, you kind of have 2 options. You could sneak up, right, and try to see him first. But if let's say it's crunchy, he'd be onto you, and so what I try to do in that case then is use a vocalization to kind of call him into me, and maybe I'd hear him walking in. So I think it's just about having been in the woods so many times and bumped a deer. You think, oh, this looks like a kind of deer habitat where you're going to see one, and then you go 10 steps further and you bump one. That would have been the good time to call. And I think through just lessons learned that I kind of, I do a lot of calling, and you know, there's times when nothing comes. A lot of times nothing comes, but I have been, I guess, successful. And I'll tell you a funny story. So this year I was, it was like the weekend before, it was a few days before I shot the buck, the saddle rattle buck. And I sat down, I had been on this walk all over the place, and I ended up getting into a spot where there was some fresh rubs, a fresh scrape, and I just started to sit down. I'm like, I'm going to wait out the last 35, 40 minutes here. And kind of looking around, grab my phone, and I I don't have reception, but I went to Facebook and I can see I still got some feed. I'm scrolling through these images, stories of people that have hunted. I think it was a New Hampshire story, and this guy says, my season lasted 15 minutes. I got in the stand. I used the bleat call. A buck ran in, I shot him, right? I was like, well, I don't have a can call, but it's worth a shot. So I stood up, gave a few bleats, and literally like a minute and a half later, this 7-point just comes right on a line, right in. So, you got to be within earshot to have it happen, and you kind of have him in the right mood too. So,
I think we learned a lot when we went to Canada, Western Ontario. It was so thick that there was places where you couldn't shoot 10 yards, and it was so thick you couldn't quietly go through cover. But we ended up learning the technique where you just put your nose in the wind and go straight into the wind and call. And the population of the bucks, the age structure was such that you had a lot of mature bucks and there was a lot of competition. And when you got close to a big buck, either rattling or grunting, they just fired up and they just went berserk. And that's kind of where we learned that technique of using the grunt call a lot when you're walking, even if you're making noise, crunchy snow, same conditions. So I think it's a real effective technique to use that grunt call.
Yep.
And with the deer population being a little higher at that time, you get a bit of confidence in it that it's going to work too.
Right.
Same thing with rattling. I like to walk a lot. I got the wanderlust, but if I can keep myself sitting there for 20 minutes, it gives enough chance for that buck to come in. Yeah.
No kidding.
Do you guys do much calling or rattling?
Yeah, I grunt a lot on crunchy snow. Like that one I got in Mass this year, that's how I got him.
Yeah.
I was tracking him on crunchy snow, and I had jumped him with a bunch of does, and he split off from the does, and I was just following him, and every 10, 15 steps I'd stop and blow the grunt tube, and I'd just listen for a second, and I'd keep going. And eventually I hit the grunt tube on a big flat, and I hear him coming. He ran right back at me, and that's how I got him.
You were in his head then. He thought a buck had come in for that doe.
Yeah, because he never smelled or saw me when I busted up the whole group. I think they just heard me coming up through and ran. That's all I can figure. And yeah, he thought I was a buck and came running back. And I've done it a couple times. I love doing that. A lot of guys won't even go out on crunchy snow. I think it's awesome because it's almost like, in a way, kind of like elk hunting or turkey hunting, because you got a call and you're trying to, bring them to you.
You're right. I used to hate crunchy snow, and now I don't say it's my favorite, but I've been successful on it a few times, and I kind of like it.
Yeah,
because you can hear that.
Right, and one thing that I think too is a lot of guys will try to sneak on crunchy snow, and I think that's almost worse. When it's crunchy, just walk.
Sound like a deer.
Just walk,
do that
man.
7 to 11 steps. Stop, grunt.
Yep.
And
don't even try to be quiet, because
when you hear a big buck or see a big buck coming, that's what he's doing. He's taking those few steps. Stop.
Yeah, because if you're trying to be quiet and cat-like, you're sounding just like a predator, which you are. So you want to try to sound like you said, a deer.
Crunch one up.
That's right, crunch one up.
Kind of piques their curiosity too, right? If you're going, you stop, and they're kind of, what is that? It brings them in from there. What about rattling? What do you look for when it comes to rattling? I know you got your saddle rattle buck. What's the breakdown on that type of situation?
I guess that's the second buck I've rattled in a saddle. So I think having a big earshot is one thing. Setup, right? Maybe you should tell your story about setup.
I don't remember which one.
You were talking about you didn't have very good cover, right? Because when you're rattling, they're going to be coming in looking for 2 bucks, right? They expect to see something.
Yeah.
And if you're out there in the open, and just kind of like turkey hunting, right?
Yeah.
When you're going to call, if you put a decoy, or if you try to get to a place where they have to get to see you, and then you've got a clear shot them, that's a better scenario than being up on a big flat ridge where they can just look up and not see any deer.
Yeah, I blew it on 2 big bucks this year, both one rattling, one grunting, and both the scenarios were the same in that I called, the bucks came in, but I was daylight. I was just up against a tree, and you got to get yourself into better cover. Hide yourself a little bit if you're going to call or rattle and bring them in.
Yep.
I kind of, my confidence isn't up in rattling as much as grunting. So when I got a bluebird day, it's a beautiful 60, 50 degree day, this blue sky, I might just pick a spot on the map 5 miles away, and then just every third of a mile do a rattle session, stay there for 15 or 20 minutes and move on to the next one. So kind of blowing off a day, seeing some real estate, looking the woods over and doing some scouting.
Yep.
But my confidence isn't that high on rattling.
Yeah. Yeah, I did more rattling this past year than I've ever done before because I was up in Maine, and kind of like what your situation was, I walked up on 2 bucks fighting a great big giant one and a giant 4-pointer. They were fighting. As soon as I crested up over a hill, they split off, and then went back there the next few days. Was bare ground, dry, hot, and tried rattling. Never got anything to come back in, but it's interesting when you see it as the first one that ever walked up on fighting. You don't see that too often, so.
No.
Yeah.
I've never rattled.
No,
never tried it. I really want to, though. Especially that video, the saddle rattle buck, really, I'm like, whoa.
That was cool.
It's like, maybe it is possible,
Yeah. No, I tried to leave in, like, the full rattling sequence.
Yep.
Even though it's just me putting them together, but just to give folks an idea, like, really how long I do it for.
Right.
You're not necessarily taking them and bashing them together.
Right.
But I'm trying to broadcast that sound as far as I can. Very, very much like you said, turkey hunting, elk hunting,
right.
It's your calling. And I guess what I've seen is in Canada too, sometimes the smaller bucks will come in, like they're curious. I don't know if I have ever got like the big boss to come in to the rattle.
No kidding. Do you think there's something to that?
I don't know.
Because I've heard some theories. I've heard biologists say that, the biggest buck in an area most likely will have the doe. And then you have like satellite bucks, around the outside of that area, and that's what a lot of times what you'll rattle in. That's a theory I've heard, but I mean, guys do. Charlie Foot's biggest buck he ever killed, he rattled in.
He said he's had like 2 of them run at him
but the biggest one, that like 150, high 150s buck he killed there, he rattled that one in.
Yeah.
Wow.
So can be done.
Yeah.
I definitely want to try this year because, like what you said, just picking a spot and just going like a quarter mile, whatever, rattling and just covering new ground. Because on those days, I'm just usually just beating feet. So I feel like doing what you're saying, stopping, doing a little rattle sequence, it's putting you in the game a little more than just beating feet.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of a good way to burn a bare ground day for sure.
Yeah. Going off the bare ground hunting and rattling stuff and the buck you get this past year in the saddle, do you look for like a lot of geological features for like bare ground hunting and stuff, or how do you kind of break down bare ground days?
I mean, I kind of say there's a big buck on every mountain.
Yeah.
So once you get onto that mountain, and when I say that, it's like a quality buck. It might not be the biggest buck. Might not be a 200-pounder, but it's a good buck that's worth having a good hunt over. And I started to really kind of look at the features this year, like even in more detail. There's a few places that because growing up in New York, like I had to come out here and start all over again, and that was really challenging. Like I was going to, at the time we didn't have Onyx. I was on I'm getting a little sidetracked, but I was on Google Maps looking at the green park areas.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I was really kind of caught up in that before I knew kind of where to go and how to select areas. And people have just tremendous resources with the podcasts and social media now to reach out to people. So that's really useful. But I've been going back to this one place, over and over, and I'm starting to see things that I didn't notice the first time. So it tells me when I'm walking through the first time, I'm not really picking up everything. These little fingers, right, that the deer travel up. Little areas where, like in Massachusetts, I was on snow and I came through this little mountain laurel, this little tiny trail, and boom, on the other side is this big signpost rub. I never would have popped in there to see it had it not been on the trail. So being on the snow is a great way, but looking at places where the deer can travel their routes and where they won't be, that's one of the things I've tried to do e-scouting, is like look at like a pond, right? They're going to be at the pond. They might have to work around it. So all right, now you've got a pinch point, really steep section of a mountain, they might not be there. So you start to think about travel patterns and just try to put yourself like essentially in the crosshairs of the way the deer travel.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And saddles.
Yeah.
Like you like to rattle, you said, because you can broadcast good sound like in those saddles, because you can get to like the sound to different ridges right in that one spot.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yep. And that buck, I know he came off of one of the knobs. So not the knob that in the video I point to, but the other one that made up that portion of the saddle. That's where he came off of. If he was living up there, maybe there was another buck on the other knob. Like, could have called either of those in, right? It really increases your chances.
What was the elevation there up in that saddle?
I don't know off the top of my head.
That was up in the whites, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So probably up a ways.
Yeah, I imagine. So what type of scouting do you do in the off season? Do you rent cameras and stuff like that, or are you just kind of?
I've got a few cameras.
Yep.
I guess I'm just kind of curious about what's in a particular area, right? If there's a really big buck, it gives me some enjoyment to go pull a camera card, download what's on there. But I try to do a bit of scouting during turkey season, right?
Oh, okay.
I'm out there. The greenery hasn't come up yet, so you still got scrapes and all that stuff from the prior years preserved. But most of my scouting is, I think someone on the podcast was saying it, is during the season.
Yep.
Like, if it was Charlie, if it was Joey.
Probably both of them. They both kind of like
Charlie,
that.
Yeah. He does a lot of he sees a lot of country when he's hiking around and stuff. But yeah, I think he set up the last few weeks before the season.
Yeah, Charlie, I think it was the one who said it. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, the best time you're going to see those.
It's
fresh
the freshest sign.
And yeah, it's true.
It's right then and there. But
just going back to your previous question about geological features.
Yep.
One thing that I've found be successful at is when you got a big wetland complex and they show up as swamps or bogs or vlies. A lot of the topo maps in New York show them as vlies.
Yeah.
But it's a big wetland complex, and work around that wetland complex and look for a rise coming out of that. Maybe 200, 300, 400 feet elevation rise.
Yeah.
A knob, and those bucks tend to go up on those rises, that elevation around those big bogs.
Yeah.
And then I would definitely have guys work those great spots called from, rattle from, or just pick up a big track.
Right, because they live kind of in those bogs, right?
They go down there and rot.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They may bed high, but
they go down there and chase the girls around.
They go down and chase does.
Yeah.
Leave a lot of scrapes.
Are the does living there because there's no cutting and stuff? Are they feeding on those edges of those bogs? Because that's where you're getting your most growth.
That's your
and
edge.
Stuff.
It's not, in New Hampshire or Maine, you're looking at clear cuts for your edge. In the Adirondacks, you're looking at the change from wetland to hardwoods and softwoods, and there's edge.
Yeah. So you guys have hunted what? You hunt Mass now, New York, Maine. You started dabbling around in Maine a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, we did Maine.
Yep.
How was that up in Maine? What was the coming from the Adirondacks and Massachusetts? It's a lot different up. I mean, you guys were way up too, right? Up Allagash.
Yeah, we were in the Allagash.
What's your interpretation of that? What did you think of it compared to New York and down here?
What did you think?
Well, it was a great opportunity to hunt. It was a bucket list hunt for me.
Yep.
I saw, in the 6 days of hunting, I saw the 4 biggest buck tracks I've ever seen in my life. And it's 54 years of hunting. It was the biggest buck tracks I've ever seen.
Yep.
We had boilerplate crunch, and we couldn't make it happen on the boilerplate crunch, but we had boilerplate crunch 5 days and 1 day of heavy rain. So, but I was impressed with the size of the deer that I did see. I saw 6 deers in 6 days.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
So.
I mean, we tracked some good ones. I was surprised by the amount of pressure that's up there. I will say there's quite a bit of pressure.
It's crazy.
But yeah, some just ginormous tracks, stride on these bucks. It was fun. I probably did. It was my second longest day up there. Where I know some guys will say they do like 20 miles in a day, and I had my phone on me counting steps, and I did 8 miles by lunchtime, and that was by noon, and that was on a track. I had he dropped me, and I was going down this road, and there's a big track crossing the road, and he was going to my right, and I said, I'll just walk down to the end of this road and see if he comes back the other way versus go up in the woods, because there was a little bit of snow to trudge through. So I got all the way down the end of the road, and I turn around because he didn't come out, and there's headlights. And I'm like, oh. And they're stopped at that track. I'm like, oh, no way. And I book it. I'm just running as fast as I can to get up into the woods and angle them off to make sure they don't get on that track before me. Because if they're gonna get out, they're gonna see my tracks on it.
Yeah.
I got up there. I was like, I almost had an asthma attack. I could barely breathe. And then I pushed that buck as hard as I could go for the next like 5 hours and went 8 miles and then got cut off by somebody else.
Dang.
Yeah. And then they went for like 2 miles and they got cut off by somebody else. It was
That much pressure up there, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always seen a ton of pressure in Maine.
Huh.
Every time I've been up there, it's like it's a tricky game to play with all those roads, man.
Yeah, it's just the axis thing. There's a road flying
everywhere.
Yeah, I was very surprised at the network of roads. Like I'm used to hunting an area, go in on a trail or something. The next road's over 30 miles away.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the Adirondacks. It's all foot entry. You're going in
Absolutely
off a
all
trailhead
foot
and
entry. You got to burn the leather, burn the rubber to find a buck track.
You ever been cut off in the Adirondacks at all?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Jeff's got a good story about getting cut off.
I probably told it before, but it was I was in college, I think. Maybe I had graduated college, but I was just kind of coming into where I felt comfortable tracking. Like, there's always something to learn.
Right.
Every year I learned something else, but I was getting to be pretty to the point where I could see a track and know, okay, that's a big buck track, and know some of the fundamentals. And there was this good buck track, but I only went like 200 yards on it. I jumped him out of his bed. He was really close to the truck. So that was the start to the day. And then he took me up on this mountain, went way up on the mountain, and he bedded in this real nasty, thick, like spruce stuff. And I just could not get in there without making any noise. So he heard me, and he went out, and I said, all right, he's going down the mountain now. I got a perfect advantage. And I sat there, had a sandwich, and as I was eating the sandwich, I heard a gunshot. But I thought it must be too far. So I go down the mountain, and he's going from running to walking now. And I'm like, okay, it's getting good. I'm gonna catch up with him. And all of a sudden, I see this buck, and I can see the rack sticking out of the snow, and I'm just like, oh no. And but then the guy ended up knowing. He was just waiting there on a drive, and this buck came in from the wrong direction, and he shot it. So, I took a picture with it, congratulated him. A couple other guys came along, and then I went on my way and hunted the rest of the day. Then a couple days later, I was on another good buck, and I missed him last day of the season. So it gave me a lot of confidence. And if I don't get a buck at the end of the year, goal is obviously to shoot a buck, right? But if I kind of would rather hunt the whole season, get my money's worth out of my tag, right? All that, shoot one on the very last day. I feel like I've got the most out of the season. So
it's not all about killing the deer.
Yep.
It seames like you kill a lot of late season bucks in Mass. It seems like, right?
Yeah, the muzzleloader season. So, Mass is going to have snow more often in the late season than the early season, and I think that's a nice advantage. Just a factor of having snow or not having snow, I think.
Yeah, you killed a lot of bucks in the muzzleloader.
Yeah, and the bucks are slowing down that time of year. They're putting the feed bag on. It's my favorite time to track.
Yeah.
Definitely.
October 25th is when tracking season begins.
Wicked. It's wicked that time of year, man.
Thanksgiving week.
They just get up and lay down, down.
Before that, you're just chasing them.
Oh, yeah.
They cover some miles.
It's all zombie walking.
November, you mean? You said
November.
Oh, yeah.
November.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Thanksgiving week.
I'm guessing for you, Jim, the Adirondacks in New York's probably your favorite state to hunt, being that you've done it for so long.
Yeah, it's in my blood at this point. 54 years of hunting there, so I like the big woods. I like the wilderness.
Yep.
It's not the biggest bucks. I'm not going to shoot a 200-pounder. Maybe a high-end buck might score 140, 150.
Yep.
But most of mine are like in the 100 to 120, 125.
Good bucks.
So, yeah,
good bucks for sure. What about you, Jeff? What do you got a favorite state to hunt? Is it?
I think
you kill them all over the place.
I mean, honestly, any place I'm hunting with Dad. to be kind of sentimental about it. Canada was really neat. Any place where there's an adventure, like going up to Maine, that was an adventure. Going to Canada the first time, boy, that was a really neat adventure. Colorado, I've enjoyed our elk trips to Colorado. So it's hard to pick a favorite. I got to get a big one in New Hampshire. I've missed 3 big bucks.
Really?
Yep.
Was that one you got last year your biggest New Hampshire buck to date? Or was it that bow buck you got?
I think the bow buck actually weighed more. Yep.
Did he? Yeah.
Yeah.
I
think that was 107. What did I say? I think the bow buck was 178. And the buck last year was close to 184, so it would have been the heaviest one. Yep.
Yeah. That's a good buck.
I'm sure you will get a big New Hampshire buck. But one thing I wanted to do real quick. Do you want to plug your YouTube channel? If people don't know, I'm sure everybody does, but
so
tell them about it.
Yeah, it's just Jeff Doyle. If you Google that, or if you go to YouTube, you can look me up. I try to put on it's a story of me trying to get a 200-pound buck. I'm not gonna pass up a big racked buck to wait for a 200-pounder, but I previous seasons I passed up some nice tracks trying to find that 200-pounder, and I thought, wow, what kind of an adventure to show just how hard it is for those people like Charlie, right? He's got a bunch that are 200 pounds, and the guys that are up there, just how hard it is and how meaningful it is to get one that's that size. Wicked. It's a unique animal.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of luck involved with it too. You can be the greatest deer hunter that walks, but still, you got to have that little horseshoe in your pocket that day.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
How did you get into doing the whole YouTube thing? Like, what influenced you to do that? Because I think you were one of the first to really do the Northeast self-filming thing, and then you kind of pioneered the over-the-shoulder look. It seems like there's not a lot of people doing that, and you kind of brought that on. But what made you want to put stuff out, or what got you into self-filming and stuff?
I couldn't explain it really. I guess I just had a camera, and I had a desire to start to film and show maybe family and others kind of what it was like being in the woods. And then I guess I started to, I didn't watch a lot of deer hunting videos like on TV because it didn't really relate to me. And I thought, I got to put something up that kind of relates to the style of hunting that I do in the Northeast.
Yep.
And people really liked it. So I continued it, and I did it was a hunting log one season, just updates kind of from the woods. And I was surprised that people liked, a video where you didn't see a deer, you didn't kill a deer. It was just about hunting.
Yep.
And the same thing with the Tracking 200 series. I try to be successful and have, I think it's averaged out to about 1 successful hunt a year on the show.
Yep. Which
is great, but a lot of the episodes are just kind of me explaining what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and being on that journey. So it's fun. It's fun to look back on the videos too. And now I'm also interested in bringing other people that are, they want to be a content creator,
right? And
they're looking to grow their subscriber list, and if they want to put a show on for Tracking 200, do an episode, have them reach out to me. I'd love to hear from them.
Yeah.
The Mountain Hunter on Instagram.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. That's cool. Yeah, I wanted to tell you that you were the reason why I started filming. Self-filming.
Really?
You inspired me, straight up. I was telling you earlier, I was one of your first, I bet you it was under 500 when I subscribed to you. It was like 2011, 12, that area.
Yeah, wow.
And you definitely were one of the pioneers of the GoPro hunting in the Northeast, and it's kind of sparked a pretty big little, community of guys doing it. So it's cool.
I guess folks look at it and they're like, hey, I think I can do that better.
Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah.
And one question I have for you, do you think the self-filming has made you a better deer hunter, or do you think it's cramped your style?
I don't know if it's made me a better deer hunter. Has it cost me any bucks? It did cost me a buck. The same year I got my highest scoring buck.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So I had a buck above me. I had called in with the grunt call. I called in 2 bucks that day, just about 10 minutes apart in the same spot. And I think the bigger buck was just slower to come in. And he caught me trying to turn it on with frozen fingers. And he blasted out of there. Well, 3 days later, I shot my biggest buck, so I really can't complain about that.
No, do you think that one was smaller than the one you got?
I think it was.
So
yeah.
It made you a better deer hunter then. Because you got a bigger one because of it.
Yeah.
While we're talking about video stuff, so we put a thing out on Instagram earlier for people to ask questions for you, and one of the first questions we got is, this is from John Dumais. He said he loves your videos. What kind of mount do you use for your camera? I know you get the over the shoulder. Is it just a backpack mount or what?
Yeah, the question's been asked quite a bit, but I've said to folks I want to do a video on it. I want to show people how I'm going to do it, and the problem is the mount I made was very specific to my backpack. My backpack, it's a Sitka pack called the Flash 20, and it weighs about 5.5 pounds dry. So I'm trying to go lighter with my gear. So I recently purchased one that is it's a Sitka. I think it's called like the Ascent 10. So it's a lot lighter pack versus like a 20 liter. It's just a 10 or 12 liter pack. So I made a mount out of PVC, and I'm gonna put a video up and show people exactly how I did it. Cost less than $10, right? You just need a GoPro, and this frame essentially sticks out of a portion of the pack, and you can reach up and turn it on and off. It's something I think everybody can do at home, and the GoPro, like I always wanted to kind of have this perspective, but it wasn't until GoPro came out with their digital image stabilization that you could finally put something up there and just have it be like rock solid. So I think folks can look out for that video, right? It's something you can make at home out of PVC, but I wouldn't recommend like strapping it to your backpack strap because it's probably a little too floppy.
Yep. Yeah, see some of that shoulder mount stuff, that there's those clips that go on the thing, and you start moving and they flop down. But yours seems pretty solid.
Yeah.
For sure. I bet you said you get asked that a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people have wanted to see it.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to share it with folks.
Yep.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yep. And another question from Landon Putney said, "What is, in your opinion, what is the most important piece of tracking gear for deer hunting?"
Oh, that's a good question.
Be for both of you, whatever you guys got. What do you think?
Boots are pretty important.
Yeah.
So is the gun.
Those.
The
Yeah.
gun's real important.
So is the gun.
You got a sweet little ultralight Remington, don't you? Or
Yeah,
both
we
you
both
do,
pretty
or?
much have the same thing.
Yeah.
I would almost say my Leopold Illumina caps. Yep. Because
Yep.
I mean that the gun and those on there allow me to keep everything sealed up.
Yep.
So when I'm tracking my my sight, my picture window when I pull up the scope is not fogged up or covered in snow. And that's for me. I like using a scope. I know guys use open sights.
Yep. Have
When
you ever dabbled with peep sight at all? Ever?
No.
No.
I have one.
You got one?
Working on getting it set up.
Yeah.
Those guns are pretty unique that we use. They were made by Remington. Remington's only 15 miles from my house.
Okay.
And I knew a lot of guys that worked at Remington. And they made them 88, 89, and 90. 3 years. And it's a Remington Model 7 FS, fiberglass Kevlar stock.
Yep.
5 1/4 pounds. We put a 1.5 to 5 Leopold on, and with the aluminum caps. And the Adirondacks is different than Maine in that you can get shots of 100 to 200 yards in that big woods, that big open woods, or you might see a deer at 90 yards. You might want to look at his headgear, and so it's important to have the scope. I do have one set up as a snow gun when it's really hung in the trees, really bad. I got a peep sight on it, but
Yep.
we both got several of those Remington Model 7 FSs. It's a great piece of gear.
Yep.
Always tape the end the gun and run a thread on it.
Yep. Yeah, I see you
Thread.
guys get the little. Is that for just a wind indicator at the end there?
Wind indicator. You got a buck coming in, and you just take a quick peek at it, see which way the wind's blowing. Just help you make the decision when you got to shoot.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not a lot of people do that. So.
And you want to use your eye picks up yellow a lot better than red, so usually you run a yellow thread.
Interesting. All right, I have to look into that. I have to put that on one of mine. All right, another question for you. We kind of talked about this one before. It's about geological features. Dennis Filto said, what geological features do you look at on a map before going into a new area? So if you're looking at a new area, what would be the first thing that you're queuing on X, would you say?
I'll say like during the season, I stay up late at night looking at Onyx.
Yeah.
I'm laying in bed.
Oh, yeah.
Before the day before, like searching Onyx, looking for different features. One thing that I tend to look for is like little ponds or wetlands,
Okay.
like little ones that the deer can be in. Like you were saying, being in a place where the bucks can kind of come off and do some of the rutting down low, and then features where if say there's snow, right? I want to be able to cut a track, so I'm going to look for these travel corridors and try to get in there and cut a track, because if that's one thing that worries me, it's having a great day for tracking but not being on a buck track.
Gotcha. That's a good way.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like,
that makes sense. Yeah, for
Always
sure.
looking at saddles and pinch points between vlies and big wetland complexes where they're cutting through.
Yep.
But saddles are dynamite.
Yep. Yeah, I like looking for. That's one of the first things I key on is saddles. Yeah. Next question from Mike Scarpa, he's a big time mass hunter. He's killed a booner, didn't he, a couple years ago?
Yeah, with his bow.
Yeah, that's great.
He's the man, wild man Mike.
Yeah. His question is, what do you regret more, going too fast on a buck track or not going fast enough?
Both.
That's a tough question.
Depends on the scenario.
Mike asking the tough questions.
Yeah.
You got to catch up to the buck to give yourself a chance.
Yep.
And then knowing when to put the brakes on, I'm terrible at, Jeff's great at. That's the difference between our success ratios. You know when's when.
I say the only time I've really regretted anything is pulling off a track too early.
Yes.
Okay.
Me too.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if it was the day I missed. No, I know what it was. I had a good track right from the road in New Hampshire up in the White Mountains, and I started out tracking the buck, and there was another buck track just down the road a little ways, and I spent like 2 hours tracking this buck, and I ended up back where he had crossed the road, right? So I was like, ooh, I followed him a little ways, and he was just he was going into area like down towards the road, and I was like, I don't want to get into that. I'm gonna go back up on the mountain. So I went back up the mountain, and I cut a buck track, and I followed a ways, and I ended up where essentially I had started in the morning, right, from the first place. So I was just kept tracking this buck backwards. So then I went up even further, and I got into it's probably the only case where this buck was on another deer track, and one deer track was going this direction, he was going the opposite way, but he was just backtracking it, and the deer would go through an opening, and then he would go out around it. And it's one of those scenarios where looking for a big wide buck track, right?
Yep.
And it got to be close to 4 o'clock, but it wasn't quitting time, and I pulled off him because I was tired, and I was worried how long it would take me to get back to the truck. And the track was a little old, but I should have just kept going till the very end. I've gone back. I went back the next year to try to cut that buck track again. I never did.
Yep.
And I regret that.
Big learning lesson there.
As a parent, it's terrible hunting with Jeff because I going back a few years, I shot this buck at 4 o'clock and went back to the truck, and I was 3 miles from the truck, and Jeff and I are in the same woods, but he was 7 miles from the truck, and he left the buck track at like 4:15, and I had the radio on, and I didn't hear from him until like 7:45 at night, and we're about a mile apart, the radio range, and I'd been waiting that whole time, nervous that something happened to him, but he stays right to the last minute, no matter how far out he is. So anyways, I said, hey, listen, I killed a big buck up there. He says, bring water. So he brought the game card up, and we ended up getting that buck out at 11:30 at night.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, that was a nice 8-pointer.
You guys had some long drags back in the day, from what I've seen.
And we're not afraid to cut the bucks up right in the woods either. Put them in the skin the buck.
Yep.
Cut the meat off, debone them, throw them in the bag, button the bag up, and then just drag the bag out, or come back the next day and bone them, put them in the pack basket.
Yep. Good. All right, I got 2 more questions, then we'll wrap it up. This one's from Ian McKendry, Beyond the Boundaries on YouTube. I don't know if you've seen any of his videos. He's got some good stuff on there. He said, what is an overlooked habitat that you have found deer in, places folks don't look at?
You were saying it, Isaac. I think close to the road.
Yeah.
I think that's the overlooked
It is.
habitat, actually.
That and houses.
Yeah, but to try to think about how I would put that into action for this coming year, there's places where it might not be like a main road, but even some of the roads through the woods, like the deer they might not cross the road, but they might be just off the road. And I think if guys are just using the strategy to like drive the roads and pick up a track, they're going to miss out on those. So from a tracking perspective, just getting it in beaten feet's one of the things that I think can be done to, improve chances.
Yep.
I think late in the season, right on top of the mountain, the biggest bucks are still right on top of the mountain in some cases.
Really?
Don't
Okay.
hesitate to go to the top of the mountain the last day of the season.
Yep.
Even when the snow's deep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. They can hang out there a little longer than, those other deer for sure. Last question, Jameson Grady, he's from Maine. He says, you happen upon 2 buck tracks side by side. They split. One is a massive track, probably the biggest you've ever seen, but goes right between 2 trees that are tight together. The other is a medium-sized buck track, and you can see tine marks in the snow where he was feeding, and he is super wide and what looks like a lot of points. Which buck are you taking? No wrong answer on that, but what do you guys think?
Well, I don't know. He had me at super wide. He had me at super wide.
Yeah.
I'd take the big track because they can twist their head and get their head through that narrow.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've dabbled on that before and talked about that.
We've talked about it.
We
Some
both-
guys will tell you if they walk through a tight gap to leave them, but
We've both tracked bucks before and killed them that go through stuff that's
this
wide.
they're this wide and they go through something like this, and it's like, well,
Like you said, they can twist their head.
they can. They
That
can
happened with my biggest Adirondack buck. There's a short little clip of me kind of celebrating.
oh yeah.
He was on the track for 5 hours, and in that time he went through this little tiny thing, and I remember kind of dissecting it and thinking, there's no little branches broke on this.
Yeah.
How small is this rack?
Yeah.
But they have that headgear on top, and they know, I think.
It's like a part of their body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They know where every tine is.
Yeah,
They know how to get through
for
the
sure.
woods.
I
Yeah.
saw a video of it's a buck going through a barbed wire fence,
Really.
big buck, and he just his rack right through there, and
No
I was
kidding.
like, wow, that's
Yeah.
they
There
know.
you go.
All right, we'll kind of wrap it up from there, but we'll end it on, you guys got any big plans for the 2022 season? Any special hunts? Any idea where you guys are going to end up, or just kind of keep on doing what you guys are doing?
Well, I did my scouting last year. I goofed up on 2 big bucks, and hopefully they're there, so I got my
Yep.
scouting done.
Yeah, you know where they are. You're going
Yeah.
back.
And real quick, do you want to tell the full story of your biggest buck?
Well, I killed them in 2006, but in 2005, Jeff and I were hunting together, and it was the last day of muzzleloader season. Jeff tracked this buck, and he went through this enormous swamp, and Jeff took him over to an island. The buck ended up going on an island and then through the wetland complex. So I had that in the back of my mind for the whole year.
Yeah.
And so I ended up going in there, and in my scouting, I found 6 cedar trees. They were about 8, 10, 12 inches, and they were just shredded, absolutely shredded. I had never seen anything like it in all my years of hunting. And they were over a half a mile stretch, and they were in a line. So I ended up hunting that buck over 100 hours. I think I probably put in 10-hour days, the dark to dark. And finally, I ended up going into that island, and there was a good scrape line on that island. I was in there before daylight, and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I heard something. I looked, and here he comes. And he was at 40 yards, and I had actually seen him bow hunting earlier in the year at 26 yards. And his G2, he had a big fork G2. He scored 181.6, and he netted 176.7. But he 40-yard shot broadside, and I ended up shooting 3 times. He ended up going into a wetland, and he only went about 30 yards. I called my best friend, and the only one I had confidence in that's not going to squeal on my hunting spot. And he came in. He took him about an hour and a half to get in there. It's 2 miles from the truck. And I ended up gutting him and then starting dragging. Had to go through that wetland complex. Had hip boots on to get through the high water. And we got him out at 9:30 at night.
Jeez.
So he was a good buck. He was the biggest buck killed in Oneida County in 80 years.
Wow.
So I live right next to Oneida County, but it was just to give you a perspective of how big a buck. It was the 100th biggest buck killed in New York at the time,
No kidding.
in
Really?
as far as non-typical. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll post a picture of that one.
How old he was.
he was 4.5.
Wow.
4.5. He dressed
181
162.
4.5.
Yeah, he just had great genetics.
Wow.
Beautiful. 17 pointer.
can,
thought
one
you were
can
gonna
only
say, like,
imagine
12
what
and a
that
half.
would have. I mean, not taken away from you killing it 4.5. I'm just saying, but like if you imagine like how big would that deer have been for
Yeah.
a New York buck? Crazy. But 181 inches, yeah.
Just the
Jeez.
genetic.
We'll post a picture of that
mutant.
on the Instagram page for sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we'll have to get a picture of that.
Yeah.
All right.
What about you, Jeff? Any big plans end of the year or for this year or anything?
I'm hoping he tags out early so we can get him up to New Hampshire and he can hunt the White Mountains with me.
Nice.
I have fallen in love with the White Mountains. You get up into the kind of high peaks area there, you go beyond the notch, and it's a spectacular part of the country.
It
If
is.
anybody that's not listening that hasn't seen it, it's something to fall in love with. So hopefully we'll get up there for a trip. But just hunting the states I got licensed to,
Yep.
Yep.
that's it.
Good stuff. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up there. We appreciate you guys sitting down with us. It's been
Yeah,
awesome.
thank
Been
you.
fun.
Thank you.
A lot of good stories. So we'll see you guys on the next one.
Yeah. See ya.
Okay.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Just want to say thank you for the support and thank you for listening. It means a lot to us. If you want to help us grow this show, share it with somebody that maybe doesn't know about it. Follow us on our social media pages. Subscribe to the show in your podcast apps or subscribe to the STAGR YouTube channel. We appreciate the support and we look forward to seeing you guys at Huntstock.